reunification for both Korea.
The comments made about reunification during President Park Geun-hye's New Year's address are making the headlines. She said reunification could be a jackpot for the two Koreas. So on the 13th, Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee delved deeper into the issue of reunification on News in Depth. Comments from the public about reunification were heard, and she also went deeper into the issues and positive developments that would occur if reunification were to happen. It was a chance to take an in-depth look at the complex concept of reunification.
We hope this special exhibition draws international attention to the issue.
Cultural correspondent Park Ji-won presented some special news in the cultural world. It was about illustrations, cartoons, and graphic novels that center on the theme of Korean victims of sexual slavery during Japanese colonial rule in the mid-20th century. The works will be exhibited at this year's Angouleme International Comics Festival in France. The festival will exhibit many works depicting war crimes and violence against women, as the year 2014 marks 100 years since the start of the First World War. This could be an opportunity for the sexual slavery issue to receive some international attention, and for this reason, Korean victims of sexual slavery and the participating artists said this exhibition is all the more special. On the 15th, President Park Geun-hye embarked on her first overseas state visit of the year. She will be out of the country for 9 days. The president is set to continue her sales diplomacy drive and focus on promoting her vision for a creative economy. And as always, Arirang TV's presidential office correspondent, Jin-joo, accompanied the president on her trip. President Park's first stop was in India. It started with the meeting with Korean residents there, and she held bilateral talks with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. After India, President Park is set to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and Jin-joo will continue reporting from the site as new updates come along.
New Delhi.
Ji Myung-kil reports on the prospects and challenges that lie ahead.
Our Ji Myung-kil has this report.
Korean industrial plants have built up a track record.
There are some news items that always garner a lot of interest in the new year.
Problems. That helped. The steel market is suffering from a global glut with supply exceeding demand by about 540 million tons. The outlook for Korea's petrochemical industry does not seem much better, as it is heavily dependent on exports to China, which itself is
The Korea plant industry.
Reporter Ji Myung-kil's story covering industrial planning begins.
to produce more than 20 million tons of steel this year.
Since it was start of the year, we actually decided to do various series on the economic outlooks for 2014. And there were a variety of topics ranging from semiconductors to industrial plants to steel industry and also even the shipbuilding industry. And since I was a bit more familiar with the industrial plants and also the steel industry, that is why I opted to go for those two topics.
Myung-kil is back on the scene in the new year. Today, he is visiting a leading Korean steel company.
올라가시죠. 3층에
아, 예.
자리도 있고.
아, 예, 예, 예.
또 올라가.
명함 하나만 있으세요? 네. 네, 감사합니다. 네,
운동대로.
감사합니다.
He arrived earlier than the appointed hour and is preparing for the interview in his own way.
알아요? 셰일가스. 그 새로운 어떤 신개념 천연가스? 극한물성 금속 소재 개발. 외울 수 있겠어? 극한물성 금속 소재. 인터뷰 때 좀 이렇게 잘 말해야 되는데. 아, 이상형 혹시
He shows his positivity as he goes over the unfamiliar terminology.
아닙니다. 여기 앉아서 네, 하시면 될 것 같아요. 어떤 식으로 하면 되는 거예요? 제가 그 이사님한테요. 그 질문을 드리겠습니다. 드리면 저 보시면서 그냥 편하게 대화하듯이 말씀해 주시면 됩니다.
The interview finally starts.
근데 이사님 올해 조금 이제 선진국들 경기 회복을 인해서 조금 철강 수요가 늘어날 것 같다는 약간 전망이 좀 있더라고요. 올해 좀 생산량 목표치를 어느 정도 잡고 계신지 그리고 작년과 대비하면 좀 얼마나 좀 더 늘어나는지 설명 부탁드리겠습니다.
작년 준공한 3고로가 이제 올해 본격적으로 가동하게 되면 저희 회사 아마 사상 처음으로 2천만 톤을 넘어설 것 같습니다. 작년하고 대비하면 한 300만 톤 이상 증가한 그런 물량입니다.
The questions continued on about the company's strategy.
중국 철강사들도 이제 본격적인 감산을 한다고 들었거든요. 좀 이런 걸 대비해서 현대제철에서 좀 어떤 자구책을 좀 마련하고 좀 계신지 그리고 좀 주력 수출 시장을 좀 어느 쪽으로 좀 생각하고 계신지.
사실 일반재의 측면에서 보면 품질상에는 큰 차이는 없다고 봐요. 그렇기 때문에 저희는 주로 이제 좀 하이엔드 쪽으로 자동차용 강판이라든지 뭐 에너지용 강재라든지 이런 하이엔드 쪽으로 좀 주력을 하려고 하고 있습니다.
일반 그냥 코모디티 스틸 말고 좀 이렇게 뭐라 해야 돼요? 극한물성 금속 소재로 해야 되나요? 그런 쪽으로 뭐 개발 추진이 좀 어떻게 되고 있는지 궁금하거든요.
He has no problems whatsoever with the difficult terminology.
결국은 뭐 저희가 지금 지속적으로 추구하는 것은 특히나 이제 저희가 현대차 그룹에 소속된 그런 철강 회사다 보니까 자동차용 강판이 주가 되는 이제 그런 제출소를 저희는 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 결국은 뭐 계속 그쪽 추세로 가는 것이 대세적인 트렌드라고 봅니다. 그래서 초고장력 강판 개발이 가장 큰 그런 이슈가 되고 있어요, 저희한테.
This time he goes to the steel mill, which is a 2-hour drive by car from Seoul.
차는 어디 있어요?
바로 저기 바로
저희 차를 따라오시면 돼요.
아, 그럴까요?
네.
아, 네, 알겠습니다. 엄청 높죠. 1.6배인가요?
1.6배. 거의 이제 3배 가까이 된다는 거죠.
가면서 트래킹을 좀 넣으면
네네,
차에 꽤 나을 수도 있어요.
The steel factory is vast and is the size of about 1,000 soccer fields, so capturing it on film won't be easy.
저런 게 최종 제품이에요. 저 둘도 두루마리 추천 말하고.
There are also some attractions to see, like rolling rolls, which are like rolls of paper. Myung-kil decides to film the whole view of the factory before checking out the manufacturing process.
코로. Blast furnace.
Aside from the chimneys, the large-sized factory was covered on all sides. He made contact with a lot of references for the report, but he always feels anew when he is on site.
I really didn't feel a sense that it was a factory because everything was concealed. And later I found out the reason why the factory itself was all concealed was because, in order to make steel, you had to heat everything up. You heat the steel, you melt it, you roll it, and they mold in the pieces. So there's a lot of noise, heat, and even like a lot of not good particles going around in the air. So that is why the factory itself was all concealed. So when I first arrived there, I really didn't get a sense that it was a steel-making factory.
It is now time to check out the casting method of steel. What caught Myung-kil's attention was the unique structure of the production line.
몇 분쯤 나와요? 아까 5분 정도 있으면 나온다 했죠?
네, 저희가 원래는 계속 나오는 롤 교체를 하는데 보통 롤 교체한테 한 20분에서 30분 정도 걸리겠죠.
잘 안 들리겠는데?
핸드마이크 써야겠죠.
핸드마이크래요? 와이어리스 안 돼요?
와이어리스가 나는 잡음이 너무 많이 들어가서 지금 수출됐는데
지금 나온대요, 선배.
Finally, through the thick fog, the bright red lump of metal can be seen.
여기서 찍을 수 있어요, 대리님? 그건 안 돼요?
The filming location was restricted due to the strict security. As a journalist, Myung-kil cannot hide his disappointment.
롤링이야, 롤링하는 거. 여기서도 한번 냉각을 시키나요?
아니 여기서는 이제 표면에 이제 스케일 제거하려고
불순물 없애려고. 맞다.
Maybe that's why Myung-kil continues to ask questions despite the loud noise around.
2012년이 297이고 작년이 380.
Facts are important for a story, and so he double-checks the numerical figures as well.
저번에 이사님 말씀하신 게 맞는 거죠? 올해 생산량 정도.
도로 1200, 전기로 1200, 2400이긴 한데
네네.
이사님이 이제 실제 이제 어느 정도 이제 실제 나오는 부분을 이야기하시는 것 같아요. 총 개판은 2400이에요.
총 개판 2400이에요?
When I was first researching about the steel industry itself, what surprised me was like the information given by the actual steel product companies and the information given by like government affiliated research centers. They had sort of different figures towards like how much each company supplies every year, how much profits they made, how much steel was being exported. So there's a lot of things going on with like the figures and like it keeps on changing. So I had to be updated with those figures, and the best way was to actually check on the people who are actually making those steel parts down at the factory.
Depending on the temperature of the heat and the cooling degree of the steel, the usage of steel sheets changes. Myung-kil is still curious and wants to know more.
어떤 재질이길래 안 녹아요? 철, 고강도 저것도 철강가요? 뭐예요?
철인데 이게 일단은 저희 슬라브가 온도가 약 이제 1200도 높아봐야 1200도 정도 되는데 원래는 철이 녹으려면 이제 1400도가
그렇죠. 1400도. 그래서 그냥 가능하구나.
계속적으로 안에 또 냉각수가 나오니까.
The steel melting process and the rolling takes place at a high temperature. He could feel the heat from where he was standing.
저 밑에도 냉각수 흐르고 있어요? 아니죠? 아니죠.
돌에 돌 내부로 해가지고
냉각수 흐르고 있어요. 몰랐네. 저렇게 나왔을 때 그냥 멘트하는 게 어떨까?
Perfect timing is required as Myung-kil wants to capture the dynamic feel of the factory. But he is caught off guard by a surprise rival.
완전 소리 질러야 되겠는데요?
The loud noise is a problem.
제가 너무 크게 말한다고요?
볼륨을 좀 줄일 테니까 원래 말하는 톤은
They hope to produce more than 20 million tons of steel this year.
He gives an awkward smile.
그러니까 저희 빨간불 들어오면
내가 움직이면
움직이면 말하라고요? To gain an edge over the global competitors. New blast furnace was completed this year. 저 다시 해야 돼요. 잘 들려요? Specialize in next generation special steel to gain competitiveness. 안 나오는데요?
He loses his timing and
To gain 숨이 막혔어요.
Myung-kil has a tough time with the stand-up.
With an oversupply of steel worldwide, Korean companies like Hyundai Steel plan to specialize in next generation special steel to gain an edge over their global competitors.
But he forges ahead, undeterred, and continues on.
To produce more than 20 million tons of steel this year. 지금이 딱 좋은데. 좀 기다렸다 할 거.
The steel plates are being made in long consecutive lines, so they go through this kind of like conveyor belt, and once the steel plate comes, a new one will come behind, and the latter one will be undergoing some processing, like for example, being cooled and being sprinkled with water, and also being turned around to go into another part section of the conveyor belt. So I think that spot was the best spot in order to do my stand-up, because you will be able to see one being processed and a new heated steel will be just coming right behind me. And so it will be waiting for its turn to get processed. So I thought, I talked with the camera crew and he said, yeah, that place will be the best spot.
네, 긴 거 한 번 나오면 마지막 한 번 하고 갈게요.
He renews his resolve and tries one last time.
With an oversupply of steel worldwide, Korean companies like Hyundai Steel plan to specialize in next-generation special steel to gain an edge over their global competitors. With the completion of a new blast furnace last year, they hope to produce more than 20 million tons of steel this year.
After several attempts, the timing, noise, and words fell together perfectly, and the stand-up was complete. Myung-kil moves to another location to capture a different process. He is having another busy day. Steel is made into a strong product after a repeated process of heating and cooling. And like the creation process of steel, Myung-kil sees himself becoming a stronger and more determined journalist through hardships and new experiences. This experience was a great benefit for him.
We see a lot of those industrial plants through television or image pictures, or even like the steel products. I mean, we do see them a lot through television or footages, but to actually go there by yourself and actually feel that huge momentum, like the presence of those huge buildings and towers, it is sort of overwhelming as you actually see it in reality. So I think that is why I have had sort of a lot of fun in actually doing this reportage. And plus about those steel plates, or what you call them as slabs, you see them being molded, you see them being actually heated up to be very bright red color, and you see them being made into steel plates that will be actually used in the building parts, components. So those little things were very actually amusing to see in reality with my own eyes.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to meet you.
And you've been in your post for how long?
Since 2009.
2009.
Yeah. So you must get the question a lot, like how does your organization differ from the UN, or work together with the UN, or is integrated with the UN?
We do that, and the UN, of course, as you know, is an intergovernmental entity, so member states. And we are non-governmental, so we actually do not represent any country or the UN itself. Our organization is composed of member United Nations associations, which are formed by regular people who want to become members.
Would you say back then there was more of a natural inclination for people to join like a civil society group than now? Now it seems very conscious and very deliberate if you're going to be part of an organization like this or other activist organizations.
That's a good question. I think maybe in those days, immediately after the Second World War, there was a very strong push in some countries, or in a number of countries, to support the idea of a global entity who would, prevent us from future wars and support, strengthening of global or multilateralism. So it's true, I mean, some organizations, not only our organization, but other global organizations had a very large membership in those days. And now, yeah, people are both more cautious now, but at the same time, I think they're more picky. So some people want to just focus on one issue organizations, you know. I want to work for children, I want to support whatever, animal rights or the environment. So I think there's also more competition now. There are many, many more NGOs than there were in those days.
Right, because when I looked through some of your documents, and it seemed like you, I guess the way that you communicate with the public, or how you serve the public, how the public can work with you.
Very much so, and I think also one thing that is different, I think, is that, you know, 50 years or 60 years ago, you could talk about the general idea of let's support the UN, and people would say, okay. Now I think, especially the younger generation, they want to be much more, so which projects are you working on in much more detail, you know, what ideas, what things will we be supporting. So even if they like the general idea of the United Nations, they want to be much more engaged on a practical level. And I think that's
so does that mean that when they do get involved that you actually do get very deep and meaningful participation?
We have to get very practical, and I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us as well.
So do your activities come like top down from like the UN's goals down, or does it go down, up?
It's a little bit of both, because we can, you know, the things that we want to support in the UN, we work a lot with information awareness raising to the general public or our target groups. But then there are some things that, you know, we want to change. So our organizations, the national or youth groups or whatever, our business partners, then we look at how we can put pressure upwards to advocate for reform or change on specific issues. So it's a little bit of both, depending on what it is.
Oh, I want us to get mic'd up. Okay. Well, Secretary General, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
United Nations associations in different countries, and there they engage different target groups to learn more about what they can do.
Our UNAs have had a number of programs in all of these different areas. It's exciting to see that there's a great interest in the work that we do, and more people want to join. For us, it's very important that youth are given the opportunity to become more systematically integrated in the global community and the decision-making processes.
We, as you know, is organized in 3 pillars. I would say on some urgent issues, we try to do